Hey, Hart District, it's Mr. Fannin from Saugus High School here. And we are here during our Unity of Community Week. And we have representatives, as you can see, from all of our comprehensive high schools. We have staff members and students from all of our high schools. And we also have a very special guest who's going to talk to us in a few minutes here. And, this week we are celebrating our Unity of Community and, coming together. And to talk more about Unity of Community, I wanted to introduce you guys to the principal of Saugus High School, Mr. Vince Ferry. You're on mute, Mr. Ferry.
Sorry about that. I'll learn this one of these days. But thanks, Mr. Fannin. I appreciate you doing this. And before I start, I do want to take a moment to thank really the students, especially the students of Saugus High School. You guys have inspired me this past year just for the love, compassion, and kindness that you have demonstrated to each other during our recovery. And I want to extend that same thank you to all the students across the Hart District who have supported us, and you've been there for us, and you've done so in so many different ways. So just thank you so much. This past week, we've had Wellness Week at Saugus High School and many other sites throughout the Hart District. Hopefully that you had an opportunity to participate in some of these wellness activities. And we hope that's something you'll continue to do, not only in high school, but just throughout your life, just continue to be well. In working with students at Saugus High School to kind of look at how we wanted to end this week, it became clear that we wanted to have an assembly, and we wanted that message of the assembly to be about kindness and how kindness makes our community strong, keeps our community united. And I do firmly believe that to be well, we must be kind, both with ourselves and to one another. So I'm excited to hear Houston's message here in a little bit and have this conversation with our panel of students. As you're aware, tomorrow is our Unity of Community Day, which is hashtag Gracie Strong, hashtag Dominic Strong, hashtag Saugus Strong. And that starts at 6 p.m. It's a 6 p.m. airtime. We're hoping you can join us. We will have the link available on our school's website. It will remain active for some time after November 14th. But again, appreciate Mr. Fannin, you putting this together today. And I'm very excited to hear Houston's message. You're muted now.
Oh, I'm muted now. Thank you so much, Mr. Ferry. I love Zoom. It's awesome. I get reminded by my students at least once a day, like, Finn, you're muted. And I'm like, oh, we play mute bingo. It's really fun. Anyway, so thank you, Mr. Ferry. I know a lot of people have put a lot of work into this week. I've just had a very small part of this. We have our wellness coordinator here who's planned a lot of things, and we've had a lot of students on campus planning things. I know on other campuses they're planning things as well. And, when you had asked me to bring in a guest speaker for this week, the very first name that came to my mind was Houston Kraft. I'd like to say a few things about him first. I brought him to our school a couple of years ago after seeing him speak on several occasions at different leadership conferences I've gone to. I've seen him speak to students, seen him speak to adults, and his message just for me just resonates with me. He's a professional speaker, an author who's just published a new book called Deep Kindness, which you can buy pretty much everywhere, Amazon, all those places. He's a curriculum designer, a kindness advocate who speaks at schools, conferences all over the world. And, he's shown us a very deep kindness today by volunteering his time just to share a few words with us and then take some questions from the staffs and students here at William S. Hart School District. And so without further ado, please help me to welcome Mr. Houston Kraft. And I'm going to remove my pin. There we go.
We're unmuted. We're good.
Yes.
We're doing it. We're doing it live, y'all. I'm so grateful to share some space with you. I know some of these faces are familiar to me and many of them are new. But this is a gift. It's a gift anytime we get a chance to spend time, even in a virtual world together, because unity is a funny thing right now in a time where we are more isolated than we've ever been, in a season of our culture and our world where we're more lonely than we've ever been. And that has consequences. And so what does unity actually look like? I love words. I've always loved words from the time I was a really little kid. In fact, there are maybe she's the only person in my life that I want to introduce to everyone on the planet, and that's my mom. I think everyone in the world should meet my mom. That's how much I like her. I think she's the most amazing human. I have a fond memory of when I was really, really little. I was learning how to spell the word temperature, and I was sitting in the bathtub, and my mom would break it down: temper at shore, temper at shore. And I think from the time I was a little kid, I just became obsessed with learning to spell and learning new words. And probably because I was an only child, I wanted to learn how to spell the longest words in the dictionary. In fact, the longest one, just for a quick fun fact, little tidbit, is 45 letters. It's Nemo ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. When I was 12, I was like, I need to win this word. I need to conquer this word. One of my favorite words, I don't know if you're thinking about one in your head right now, but one of my favorite words is petrichor, which is the smell after a fresh rain. A rare breed here in Los Angeles, but it's a good one. And the smell in LA is a little different than the smell in other places in the world. You get the point. Kindness has become a favorite word of mine, partially because I think it is misused, mishandled, misappropriated, messed up. And I think it's a word that bugs me so much because it's one of those words that we use so frequently without fully understanding what I believe it can or should be in our current reality right now. I've had a chance to work with lots of schools, Saugus among them, so it's so cool to be back even virtually. And I think probably out of the 600 schools I've worked with, I would guess 98% of them talk about kindness as being important to them. It's part of their mission statement, it's part of their motto, their acronym, it's hung up on clever murals on the wall. It's part of the theme for the year. And yet, as I walk around schools, so often I experience kindness as a poster, kindness as a week or a day. And one of the most commonly seen posters, at least in the past 10 years that I've been doing this, is throw kindness around like confetti. I don't know if you've seen that poster. I don't know if you know that poster, but I have a temptation to tear that poster down always, both virtually and physically, because I think that it does more harm than good. And I get it. I get the point of it, right? The whole intention is that we just need more kindness in the world. But I think the unintentional thing it does is it implies that kindness is as simple or as easy as throwing confetti around. And I would say that if kindness was as simple or as easy as tossing confetti around, the world would be a much more kind place. But you, like me, look into the world, and I think we all see the gap. We see this really frustrating gap between what we say is important, kindness, and how sometimes we actually treat each other. We know that living in a community filled with unity would be a really beautiful thing. And yet, it's a lot more complicated than I think sometimes we give it credit for. I believe kindness is the pathway there, but what does that kindness actually look like? I don't think it's confetti. In fact, I think one of the most damaging narratives we have in our world right now is kindness is free. I think the kind of kindness that the world needs presently is the kind that costs us something. It's the kind that costs us time, which we have a limited amount of. The kind that costs us energy, which we only have so much of. The kind that costs us comfort, even when we don't feel like it. The kind that costs us a sacrifice in order to show up for people that don't look like us, talk like us, think like us, look like us. That's the kind of kindness I believe is necessary to the kind of unity that we're talking about. And I think we have this visual in our brain that unity is like people in a big circle holding hands, and it's not. I think that unity is the deliberate choice to understand how different we are, and yet choose to show up in kindness anyways. Choose to show up in generosity anyways. And as I look around in the current context of our world where we are evidently divisive, I think to myself, what kind of kindness do I need to show up with today? I think about my mom, this person I think the rest of the world should meet. And I think about how every single day, starting in kindergarten, my mom would pack my lunch. You could almost always expect a sandwich on a little hoagie roll, little bag of chips, a sparkling water from Costco, and a Post-it note. On that Post-it note was typically a word of the day, maybe something like petrichor. Sometimes it was a quote, or sometimes it was just a note to remind me that you loved me. My friend Dexter Davis has this really beautiful thought. He says, we're not human beings, we're human becomings. Will Durant has this great quote. Maybe my mom wrote it in my lunch one day, and it says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. I'd make one edit. I think that kindness is not an act. I think it's a habit. I think it's something that we make time for, that we add into our daily schedule every single day over time until we become it. And as I think about unity in the context of your community, as I think of unity at the much larger scale, I think about what it looks like to make that choice. What does a daily note look like? What is something that costs you 2 or 3 minutes that you can do to reach out to feel connected to someone that might not seem like a big deal in the moment? But starting in kindergarten, my mom wrote a note in my lunchbox every single day, all the way through 12th grade, 13 years. And it adds up. I want to start with that as a frame for the day. And what I'm super excited about is just to answer some questions, to think about what does kindness look like in the context of our current reality, in the context of heart, the context of Saugus, in the context of what it means to be strong, and the context of where we go next. Jeremy, tell me who we're talking with today.
All right. So I think I have us all back on screen right now. First up, I'm going to bring Mr. Herrinks from Canyon High School, otherwise known as Senor. All right, so I'm going to pin him so we can see him. And then I'm also going to pin Bella, who is the ASB Vice President at Canyon High School. There you go, Bella. Senor, go ahead and take it away. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
All right, so from Canyon, our question is, Houston, you mentioned in your interview with Cian that anxiety is a huge barrier to kindness. How do you think we can combat this anxiety, or how do you think we get around it to still be kind?
Well, if I heard you right, the question is, how do we combat anxiety to show up and be more kind? I love that question so much because for me, it reminds me of the challenge of kindness and how it's harder than it looks. That my friend, this woman named Dr. Michelle Borba, she wrote this book. She's been researching and thinking about empathy for 30 years. She knows her stuff. And she says, you know what I've discovered is the biggest barrier to empathy, the biggest barrier to connection is anxiety and fear. Both of which I would say are increasing in our world. And she says it really beautifully, even if it is sad how true it is. She says, when anxiety goes up, empathy goes down. Because the more worried I'm about what's going on in my world, the harder time I have thinking about what's going on in yours. Let's make that real in terms of the context of like our life as a student. You know, the average student today has as much anxiety as the average psychiatric patient from the 1950s. And we could probably spend the rest of the time in this conversation talking about why that is. I even see people's faces being like, cool, that's a great fact. That's a frustrating, hard fact to listen to. And I'm sure you resonate with it. You feel it. And it's for 1,000 reasons. It's partially the advent of social media. It's partially because we have screens surrounding us all the time. It's partially because we receive more information than any human in the history of our world has before. And that is only increasing exponentially. You know, we're exposed to 100,000 words a day, over 30 gigabytes of information, and people are on their screens 6 to 9 hours a day. There's so much coming at us that we can't help but experience some level of anxiety around that. To me, that's really helpful, Bella, because I feel like I have a hard time with the idea of self-care. It naturally feels selfish, and I know all the things, right? The people that tell me, like, it's like on planes when the oxygen mask comes down and you're supposed to put your oxygen mask. I'm like, no, I get it. I get the premise of it. But to me, I like the idea. I like understanding what prevents me from connecting with people, because it gives me a stronger case to want to take better care of myself. If I know that anxiety makes it harder for me to reach out and check in with you, talk to you, be kind to you, Bella. I think to myself, how do I get myself out of the way? And sometimes the best answer is learning how to best take care of me. So I'll tell you, at least for myself, Bella, I don't know what this is for you, but one strategy I use is I protect time on my calendar. Like I literally every single day on my calendar from 8 to 8:30 in the morning have time that no one's allowed to touch. Like no one's allowed to schedule stuff in that time. And during that time, it doesn't mean I use all 30 minutes, but my current self-care practice is I love to dance. My dad, when I was like 5 years old, told me that girls like guys that can dance. And so ever since then, I've tried to learn how to dance. And so every morning I go out and I'm in my front yard looking very silly with my headphones in. I put on music and I dance for like 10 minutes and then I go walk and get coffee. And that to me reduces my anxiety to start the day. That way I can show up and better take care of others. So number one, as anxiety goes up, empathy goes down. So my brain goes, how do I make anxiety go down so empathy can go up? And that means taking care of myself so that I can better love you.
That's awesome. So you don't want to like show us your moves right now, do you?
Oh yeah, great. You can find it on Instagram. I'm dancing with my dad on Instagram.
All right, cool. Okay, thank you, Bella. So we are going to now, let me just make sure I have the pins on the right people here. We're going to now bring in Mr. Marcelli from Castaic High School. All right, and he's the ASB director. And also Grace, oops, yeah, I've got Bella still pinned on there. I couldn't, all right. And then we also have Grace Kelly, who is the ASB president at Castaic High School. Go ahead, Grace, ask your question. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much for coming today. My question is, why do you think kindness is such a powerful thing, although it may seem simple to people at first?
Oh, Grace, I feel like kindness is a powerful thing because I think it is what defines us as humans. My friend Brad Montague, he invented, or he created Kid President. I don't know if you ever watched any of those videos. Brad's an amazing creative guy. And one of the stories that he shared with me was the story of this conversation between a group of students and this famous cultural anthropologist, Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead, anthropologist, she studies how civilizations come to be. And a student in the audience said, Margaret, when do civilizations start? And Margaret says, when you find a broken bone that's been healed. So they, the people that study civilizations, they go back and they try to uncover, okay, when did this actually start? Is it irrigation? It was like the advent of farming. Is that civilization? She says, no. Is it the advent of politics and being able to create structures of governmental agencies to facilitate the running of different organizations and people? She says, no, it's a broken bone that's been healed. In fact, they found evidence of this, right? They've dug up these bones of femurs that have been intentionally bound and healed together. And people are like, well, why is that the beginning of civilization? She goes, because it goes against everything that is instinctual as humans. Meaning we are built for survival on a very primal level. And as we move with a tribe and we're moving to the next destination, if someone breaks their leg, they are a detriment to the group. And our most natural instincts are for survival, which means we need to forge ahead. But Margaret Mead says, when someone decides to choose against the natural fear, the natural instinct that says, just protect yourself at all costs, to go back and sit with someone and mend a broken bone. She says, compassion. Kindness is where civilization begins. I think that's true then, however many thousands of years ago, as it is now. What does it look like to think about your world beyond yourself? What does it look like to, even though it might be scary, terrifying, against all your natural instincts, to reach out and help someone? Why? Because they might laugh at you, or they might reject you, or you might fail them, or you might not have the right word to say, or you might be the next target of the person making fun of them. Everything in our body says don't do this, and yet our choice or our willingness to choose that discomfort in the face of those fears is what makes us most human. And I think we need to demonstrate that humanity very presently in our world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gracie. Or Grace, I should say. Sorry, I have a Gracie in one of my classes. All right, next up from Golden Valley High School, we have Miss McCann, who's the school librarian and also the advisor for Bring Change to Mind. All right, and then we also have Jasmine Reblando, who is the ASB president. And there is Jasmine. Go ahead, Jasmine.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you so much for giving us a piece of your mind and sharing with us all your wisdom. But my question for you is that not that society has grown to be unkind, but besides social anxiety, why has it become so difficult to show kindness, such as simply saying hi to the people that we walk by?
Great question, Jasmine. I think there's two parts. One of them is the cultural misunderstanding of what kindness is and what it isn't. And if we think about kindness as just those confetti moments, if we think of kindness just as pleasantries, the way I distinguish the two of those is it's nice versus kind, right? Niceness is just the willingness to say hi or please or thank you. But I don't think niceness does anything to make a meaningful difference on culture, right? To change the status quo. Niceness is usually just an exercise that is comfortable or already convenient to me. So I think part of it is, the reason I love words so much, Jasmine, is because the way we think about things in our brain shapes the way we act with them in the world. So if I just think of kindness as, hello, how are you? Hi, how are you? I'm fine, fine, how are you? I'm fine. If we just think of that as kindness, I would suggest that we're never going to progress towards a more compassionate world, right? We have to challenge ourselves to recognize that kindness is a lot more complicated. It's going to require more from me as an individual to show up and exercise it in my community. Why is that hard? Well, there's part two. The way that I think about it is circles of impact, or circles of empathy, or circles of understanding, or circles of influence. There's a lot of ways to process this, but maybe one of these makes sense to you, Jasmine. This idea that we typically are most able to be kind towards the people that are most like us. And the farther out from us that we get, the harder that perspective taking becomes. It makes sense. If I grew up in the same neighborhood as a person, and I had a same religious background, or a same political background, or a same racial background, I have an easier time understanding the circumstances that make you you. And do I have a perfect interpretation of it? No. But the farther out I get from me and my personal experience, oftentimes the harder kindness becomes. Because if I don't understand what you need, it's really hard to meet those needs. That's why I believe very deeply that the skill that is most critical in the current reality of our world, that I think we are collectively lacking, is empathy and listening. My ability to listen to you in a way that makes you truly feel heard and allows me to understand you better. I believe that we have to learn to listen better in order to love each other well. And we see that play out in the current realities of our world. Yeah, like you think about the political divide, you think about the racial divide, and these conversations that feel like they reach a stalemate because they're saying, no, I'm going to help you from my perspective, instead of saying, I'm going to reach into your perspective to understand what you actually need so that I can help you in your current reality. That's hard. And I like to describe empathy as intentional imagination. And oftentimes those really big gaps require a huge exercise in imagination that typically we either don't know how to do or don't want to make time for. Or the understanding of the person that's different than you is so uncomfortable, we run back to the people that make us feel the same.
Cool. That was a great question, Jasmine. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to our friends from Hart High School. From Hart, we have, let me find her. We have Miss Fairborn. There she is. Miss Fairborn's a social studies teacher and also the wellness coordinator. And then we also have Camille Dolphin, who is the ASB vice president. Take it away, Camille.
Hi, thank you so much again for being here. It means so much to hear you and what you have to say. So our question was, how can we as students generate more kindness throughout our school, for example, with students and teachers, students to other students, to the faculty overall? Just how can we generate that?
I like that. How can I be a kindness generator? It's a good question. I would say, as a general rule, consistency wins. I think about my mom writing a note every day in my lunchbox. I think about how the small things over time are going to add up more substantially than a one big off event ever will. Right. So a week celebrating unity is a really great start, but to make it the end is the mistake that oftentimes happens. We have a kindness week, and we know that it should be more than a kindness week, but we don't always know how to generate time after that. The statistic that scares me a lot, Camille, is that 45% of our day is habit. Now, that seems like a big amount, but when you really start to think about it, you start to realize how true it is. Why do we do that? Why do we have so many things that we just repeat day in and day out? Well, our brain is always looking for ways to conserve energy. Right? Every time that you and I make a conscious choice to do this or that, it costs me something. It costs me time, energy, a conscious decision to do this thing. And so our brain's always looking for habits to make our life easier and to make our life less exhausting, because it's already pretty exhausting. And so we have all these little mini habits. And that data point to me gives me like a structure to say, okay, 45% of my day is habit. Have I thought about making any percent of that 45% kind? Meaning, what does it look like to add 1% of kindness to my daily life? So instead of planning the really big event or the big fundraiser, we're going to raise $100,000 for X. What if it just looked like, I'm going to do this one thing every single day? I'll give you a couple of examples that mean something to me. One of them that I've adopted in my life, Camille, is to send a daily "this reminds me of you" message. I challenge myself to do that every single day, and I have different ways that I do that. I have an app, maybe used to be for like Time Hop, or the things that like go back in time on your social media. And so I go through that every day. It takes me 5 minutes, and I always find a picture of myself and another person that I'll send to that person, be like, oh, remember this. I love music. Music is my love language. So every week, my Spotify Discover Weekly just keeps getting better and better and better. And as I'm listening, I have a group of friends that I know music is their love language too. So at least 3 times a week, I'm sending a song to another person in my life. So I've made that a part of my 1%. A new habit that I recently adopted, Camille, is with my friend Luke. He's a senior this year. I met him back in October at an event I was speaking at. And we decided, because he was going through a tough time, that every single day, didn't matter what time, we were going to send the number 1 to 5 to each other in a text message. That's all it had to be, right? That was the thing that we wanted to get traction or consistency on. 1 is I'm having a really bad day. 3 is it's an average day. 5 is like, this is a really, really good day. So sometimes Luke will send me a 5 and be like, I just beat my friends in golf and 25 cents was on the line. It was a big win. That was the 2 days ago. But sometimes he's like, I'm at a 2 because I'm stressed out. College applications are going on and I feel like I'm buried in all this work. And I get to respond back. Cool, I'm at a 4 or I'm at a 2. And that's a simple emotional check-in that I get to do with someone that I don't even know super well, but I feel connected to this person and I feel like we have a cool little system that doesn't take a lot of time, but it always feels meaningful. It gives me a chance to check in on how he's doing, and it gives me a chance to think to myself, how am I doing on a scale of 1 to 5 today? Right? And even sometimes just like verbalizing that to someone else can take me from a 3 to a 4. So the answer to your question in my brain is decide on the 1% shift that you want to make, and it doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to be consistent.
That's a great question, Camille. Thank you so much. Next up, from Saugus High School. All right, we have Miss Katie Tenate, who is our executive ASB president, and we have Miss Caitlin Holt, who is our choir teacher and our wellness coordinator. Let me pin Katie. There she is. My 2 Katies. Here we go.
Hi, Houston. First of all, love watching you speak anytime. I'm so grateful to be able to hear you, even if it is virtual, and I know the students will appreciate it tons. Our question today is just focused on how do you be kinder to yourself? You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, especially for me as a senior. I'm doing college apps. I'm looking through like my entire high school career, and sometimes it gets a little hard. So how do you maintain kindness within yourself?
Yeah, such a good question, Katie. Thanks for your kind words to start. How do we be kinder to ourselves? I think there's a couple of ways to think about that. The first one is like, what are your practices, right? So for me, one way I'm kind to myself is to make time to dance. Like that is something I protect in my life because I know it makes me feel better. And sometimes it's very silly because the things that we know are good for us, we sometimes refuse to do. It's this bizarre thing. The Greeks have a word for it. Of course they do. I'm a word guy. It's akrasia. Akrasia stands for or roughly translates to our weakness of will, meaning there are things we know we should do, but repeatedly don't. It's bizarre. We're working on it as human beings. But I've developed systems in my life to try to hold me accountable to doing the things that I know make me feel good. The second one I think is just like a perspective shift, which is one of my favorite quotes, one of my favorite authors is a woman named Dr. Brene Brown. And her simple wisdom is speak to yourself like you would speak to the people you love. It's not that complicated, but it is profound in the sense that so often our inner dialogue is way more harsh than the dialogue we offer people we care about. And it feels silly, like that should be allowed. You know, I think about, I have like a filtration system for my water. I don't know if you have one of those, like a Brita or something like that. I think it's silly that we have like filtration for our water, but we don't give ourselves permission to filter our own inner thoughts. Because we have so many thoughts on any given day. And if we don't ever question those thoughts, then we have like a really unfair trial against ourselves. We become the judge, the jury, the prosecutor, and the executioner, right? Because internally, we're making the entire case to ourselves that you're not good enough for this, or you should look like this, or you're not busy enough doing this thing, or your worthiness is based on this. And that is a wildly unfair trial that we would never let fly with a friend who's speaking that out loud to us. We'd be like, no, I love when you do this, or the way you, like, you're an amazing friend because of this. And so for me, sometimes being kinder to myself is that perspective shift that I need a filter. I need another voice besides my own to make the case more fair. And what does that look like in a practical sense? Well, sometimes it actually looks like verbalizing it to someone that we care about, being like, hey, I had this thought, and it might seem silly, but sometimes I say to myself, blank. Do you think that's true? And someone that genuinely cares about and that you've developed trust with will always offer you a different perspective. And it doesn't mean that you immediately take that and you're like, right, okay, I'm a good person, I'm fine now. But it at least gives you a chance to make a more fair case in a case that is actually really critical, right? How kindly we speak to ourselves has so much bearing in how we show up in the rest of the world. So take that case seriously and invite outer counsel in. Because I think about like shame and despair in my life is like the world's external criticism that I start to repeat in my own voice. And I start to repeat it long enough that I start to believe that it's true, even though it is capital T not true. Oh, you're muted.
I'm muted again, sorry. My microphone picks up every little sound, so I'm trying to mute myself. It's the first time I forgot. Okay, thank you guys. Next up, we have from Valencia High School, we have Miss D, who is the ASB director at Valencia High School. And then we also have Gavin Ballion, who is the ASB executive president. Take it away, Gavin.
Hi, thank you again for being here. Like everyone said, you're doing an amazing job. But our question was, how can you express kindness so it is received well in the online, like isolated era?
That's a good question, Gavin. I feel like that part of it is, I think about kindness so often as identifying need and meeting those needs. And so I think sometimes like the practice of just trying to be kind in the online space just to do it isn't always like the best use of our limited time. So when I think about my personal practice of kindness, Gavin, I think to myself, like, who needs something from me today? And I put that person over here. And then I say, okay, I only have 10 minutes to give today. And I put that over here. And I say, okay, how do I combine those two things in a way that's going to meet that need if I can? Right, so maybe I know today that my classmate didn't show up for the third time to the Zoom class that I normally see him in. Maybe that person needs someone to check in on them. So for me, that could just look like a FaceTime. right? I think FaceTime is one of the more humanizing versions over text right now, and it's like it's harder to ignore a FaceTime than it is a phone call. So that's one of my favorite ways to check in. Maybe I know that a friend had a really tough day a few days ago, whether it was academics related or it's the start of the season that they would normally be playing this thing in and they don't get to play this year, like whatever that thing is. Maybe I know that they need just like a pick me up. So I might go through and send a voice note. One of my favorite challenges to myself that was inspired by my friend Thane. He'll send a 2-minute voice note every day to someone in his life and just try to fill it with as much good stuff in it as possible. So just having that frame of like, all right, I'm going to send a 2-minute voice note and I'm not going to stop until I've done 2 minutes of goodness to send to this person. Maybe I know it's like my grandma, right? It doesn't always have to be like student to student. And I don't live in the same state as my grandma, but my grandma's got an iPhone. She's kind of hip. And so sometimes I will send a video to her. She's not always great at FaceTiming. So sometimes I'll just send a video, like walking around being like, hey, this is what's going on in my day. Because sometimes my grandma just likes to know like what's happening in my life. And I know that she needs that in order to feel less alone. So I don't know if there's like a simple solution to like feel more connected in an online world. But what I do know is that kindness is about meeting needs. And when we try to meet everyone's needs every day, we end up doing it not very well. We end up doing the watered down version that doesn't actually help. It's kind of like the gentle airport massage chair that you put in like a few quarters and it gives you like the bad versus like the more like I've paid for a spa experience, which leaves you like walking out smelling like essential oils and feeling very relaxed, right? There's a different experience between the two of those. And I think deep kindness, practical, like meaningful kindness is about really identifying needs and being the professional masseuse, if we're going to carry the metaphor forward. You get the point. Think about what one person needs and think about one way you can meet that need and do it very intentionally, as opposed to trying to solve everyone's digital loneliness problem.
Cool. Thank you, Gavin, for that. I definitely appreciate the metaphor, Houston as an English teacher. So we're going to bring in now from our friends at West Ranch High School. We're going to bring in Nicole Augusta, who is the ASB president. And we're also going to bring in Miss Brochet, who is a math teacher at West Ranch High School as well. Go ahead and take it away, Nicole.
Thank you so much. And I think this question is a perfect one to round out this discussion. And that is, what happens when our habitual acts of kindness are not enough? And what can our next steps be, especially in this virtual realm, when it seems like another student needs more help than we can offer, or even if we need extra support?
What a beautiful question. I feel like in some ways it feels like the question is about hope. And hope to me is a lot like looking down at an ice bath and knowing that it's good for you, but sometimes you're trying to like measure the pros and the cons and whether or not you should jump in, because there's a piece of it that hurts to hope. And then there's a piece of it on the far side that feels really good. And I think a lot of people give up on kindness because they feel like over time, the pain has outweighed the benefit. I think people give up on kindness because they've chosen to care in the past. And in response, the person that they cared about or the circumstances of the world kicked them in the face. That the person that they grew trust with, all of a sudden that trust got broken. And I think especially as we get into middle school and particularly high school to me was like a reckoning of a time where I think I had to make a deliberate choice to keep caring or believing in kindness, because the rest of the people, or a lot of the people around me, tried to tell me the story that it was cool not to care. And I think the story that it's cool not to care is just sold to us by a lot of people who tried to care and got hurt. And now they're trying to protect themselves by choosing apathy. I would argue apathy is one of the more easy ways to live our life because it doesn't require us to risk anything. The more we want to give kindness, Nicole, the more we risk failing at it, the more we risk getting rejected by it, the more we risk people laughing at us, the more we risk it not working, the more we risk it feeling like it's never enough. And hope to me is balancing both the good and the bad, and choosing to look at the good. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring the bad. It's making a deliberate choice to walk into the good, to plunge into the ice bath, even though there's shock and there's frustration and cold, because on the far side of the whole thing, I'm going to say, I feel better. And I think people that look at hope and criticize it think about it as like toxic positivity, that it's just like all smiles and rainbows and butterflies, which I think kindness has a danger of going to that territory. But I think that the ongoing practice of kindness is the recognition that it may never be quote unquote enough, but it is something, and it is progress, and it is what makes us human, and it's something that we can continue to choose in spite of all the frustration and the pain. That's not easy work. But I think it is some of the most purposeful things that we can do with the time that we have here. And so my challenge would be to choose to care in spite of the pain, to choose to hope in spite of the negativity, and to choose to get in the ice bath knowing that perhaps on the far side, you'll feel refreshed. Don't do this to me again.
I mean, it's such a great way to end. That's only the third time in this Zoom session that I was muted. I'm so fortunate to be a part of a school district with such amazing staff members and such amazing young people who, all of you guys had such great questions for Houston. And I want to again, a little applause for Houston for coming in today. Thank you so much, Houston, for volunteering your time. Don't forget, please, to check out our link for our Unity of Community video tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And I just want to thank one last time everybody who took the time out of their day to be here today. And I wish everyone well. Thank you so much for being here, guys.